Have you ever really stopped to think about what actually defines life?
It's a deep question, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, beyond just, moving around or reacting to things, there are these incredibly complex, uh, vital processes constantly happening inside us.
Inside every living thing, really.
Exactly. Even when we're completely asleep, they're kind of like this silent engine keeping everything running.
The background operations.
Totally.
Yeah.
So today we're doing a deep dive into these core biological processes, the ones that sustain all living organisms, from microscopic amoebas right up to us complex humans.
And plants, too. Can't forget the plants.
Oh, absolutely. And we've got a great stack of sources here, detailed notes, diagrams, research summaries to really help us unpack it all.
Yeah, and our mission really is to pull out the key insights on nutrition, respiration, transportation, and excretion.
The big four.
The big four. We want to get beyond just what they are and understand how they all, link together, how they create this cycle that maintains life itself.
Should be interesting. Lots of connections to make.
Definitely. Prepare for a few of those aha moments, I think.
All right, let's kick off with the first big one then. Nutrition.
Makes sense. Fueling the system.
So at its heart, it's about how organisms get the food, the nourishment they need.
That's it. And broadly speaking, there are two main ways life goes about this: autotrophic and heterotrophic nutrition.
Okay, autotrophic sounds like self-feeding.
Exactly. Autotrophs are the self-nourishing ones. Think green plants, algae, some types of bacteria. They literally make their own food.
Oh, using sunlight.
Mostly, yeah. They capture sunlight energy, or in some cases, they can use chemical energy. It's pretty amazing.
And the big example of that, the one everyone learns about, is photosynthesis, right?
Definitely. It's fundamental. Green plants use this incredible process. They take basic ingredients, carbon dioxide from the air, water from the soil.
Simple stuff.
Right. And then using chlorophyll, that green pigment that captures sunlight.
That's the key.
It is. They use that captured energy to convert the CO2 and water into sugar, that's their food, and oxygen, which they release.
The oxygen we breathe.
The very same. And what's really neat is how water splits. That's where the oxygen actually comes from, and the hydrogen goes into making the sugars.
Wow. So how does the CO2 get in?
Good question. Through tiny pores, usually on the underside of leaves, called stomata.
Like little mouths?
Kind of, yeah. They open up to let CO2 in, and they also let oxygen and water vapor out. And they have these special guard cells around them.
Guard cells?
Yeah, they control whether the stomata are open or closed, mostly based on how much water the plant has. It's a neat little regulatory system.
Smart. Okay, so that's the self-feeders. What about the rest of us?
Right, that's where heterotrophic nutrition comes in. Heterotrophs depend on other organisms for food. This includes all animals, fungi.
Basically, things that eat other things.
Pretty much. And there are different styles of heterotrophic feeding, too.
Oh, like what?
Well, first there's holozoic nutrition. That's what we do. And most animals. You take in solid food, and then you break it down inside your body.
Okay, ingestion and internal digestion.
Exactly. Then you have saprophytic nutrition. Think fungi, some bacteria. They feed on dead and decaying stuff. Nature's recyclers.
Breaking down fallen leaves, dead wood.
Precisely. And finally, there's parasitic nutrition. Parasites live on or inside another organism, the host.
Like ticks. Or that Cascuda plant you sometimes see strangling other plants.
Perfect examples. They derive their nutrition directly from the host, often, harming it in the process.
Fascinating how varied the strategies are. Let's zoom back into that holozoic one. Taking in solid food. Even simple organisms do that, right? Like an amoeba.
Oh, absolutely. An amoeba is a great example of holozoic nutrition in a single cell. It's an omnivore, eats various tiny things.
How does it manage without a mouth?
It uses these temporary extensions called pseudopodia, sort of like false feet.
Right, I've seen pictures. They flow around the food.
Exactly. They engulf the food particle, pulling it inside the cell into a little bubble called a food vacuole.
A tiny stomach.
In a way, yeah. Enzymes are secreted into the vacuole to digest the food. Then the nutrients are absorbed, and any waste left over is just pushed out of the cell. Simple, but effective.
So that's the single-cell version.
Right.
What about us? Our digestive system seems, well, a lot more complicated.
Oh, it is. It's a masterpiece of specialization, really.
Yeah.
A long journey.
What's maybe the biggest difference compared to that amoeba? Or a common misconception?
Good question. I think the sheer length and specialization is a huge leap. Allows for much more complete digestion and absorption, which we need for our energy levels, and a common misconception. Maybe that digestion only happens in the stomach.
Right, people think food just drops in there and dissolves.
Yeah, but it's way more involved. It's this whole system. The alimentary canal, which is basically the tube from mouth to anus, plus associated glands like the liver and pancreas. And it follows 5 key stages: ingestion,
Taking food in,
digestion,
breaking it down,
absorption,
getting the good stuff out,
assimilation,
using that good stuff.
then digestion.
Getting rid of the leftovers.
Precisely. It's a whole process.
Okay, walk us through that journey. Where does it start?
It all begins in the mouth. Obvious, maybe, but crucial stuff happens here. Your teeth start the mechanical breakdown, mastication or chewing,
And the tongue.
tasting, mixing the food with saliva, and saliva is key. It's secreted by salivary glands and contains an enzyme, salivary amylase.
Amylase. That breaks down starches.
Right away, it starts digesting complex carbohydrates into simpler sugars like maltose. Plus, saliva lubricates everything, makes it easier to swallow, and has some antibacterial properties too.
So more than just wetting the food.
Ooh, definitely. Then, once you swallow, the food mass goes down the esophagus.
Just a tube, right? About a foot long?
Roughly, yeah. But it's not passive. It has muscular walls that contract in waves.
Paracelsus.
That's the one, peristaltic movements. They actively push the food down towards the stomach. That's why you can swallow even if you're upside down, though I wouldn't recommend trying it.
Huh. Okay, so it reaches the stomach. What happens there? I know it's acidic.
Very acidic. The stomach is this J-shaped muscular bag. Its lining secretes mucus to protect itself.
From the acid.
Exactly,
Right.
because it also secretes hydrochloric acid. This acid kills off a lot of harmful bacteria and creates the perfect environment for another enzyme, pepsin, to work.
And pepsin tackles proteins.
Yep, starts breaking down proteins. The stomach churns everything together, mixing the food with these secretions until it becomes this semi-liquid paste called chyme.
Time.
Okay, ready for the next step.
Ready for the small intestine. And despite the name, this is the longest part of the digestive tract.
Really? How long?
Can be around 20 feet or 6 meters coiled up in your abdomen.
Wow.
And this is where the main event happens. Most chemical digestion is completed here,
Oh.
and crucially, almost all nutrient absorption takes place.
How does it absorb so much?
Its inner surface is incredible. It's folded and lined with millions of tiny finger-like projections called villi.
I've heard of those.
And the villi themselves have even tinier folds called microvilli. All these folds create a massive surface area.
Like huge. Think like a tennis court, all packed inside you. It maximizes contact with the digested food for absorption.
Incredible design. What about the chemicals? More enzymes.
Oh, yes. The small intestine receives digestive juices from 3 main sources. First, the liver produces bile.
Bile helps with fats, right?
Exactly. Bile gets stored in the gallbladder and then released. It emulsifies fats, breaks big droplets into tiny ones, making them easier to digest. It also neutralizes the stomach acid, making the chyme alkaline.
Why alkaline?
Because the enzymes from the next source, the pancreas, work best in an alkaline environment. The pancreas secretes potent pancreatic juice.
What's in that?
Powerful enzymes, things like trypsin and chymotrypsin for proteins, amylase for carbs, and lipase for those emulsified fats. The pancreas is fascinating too. It's both a digestive, exocrine gland, and a hormone, endocrine gland, making insulin.
Dual role. Okay, liver, pancreas was the third.
The walls of the small intestine itself have intestinal glands. They secrete intestinal juice, or secus entericus.
Catchy name.
Huh, yeah. This contains the final enzymes needed to complete the job, breaking down remaining carbs into glucose, proteins into amino acids, and fats into fatty acids and glycerol. Now they're small enough to be absorbed
Absorbed through those villi.
through the villi and into the bloodstream or lymphatic system.
Okay, so almost everything useful is absorbed there. What's left?
What's left moves into the large intestine. Its main job isn't really digestion, but absorbing water and electrolytes like salts from the remaining indigestible material.
So it solidifies the waste.
Pretty much. It compacts it into stool. It also hosts helpful bacteria that produce some vitamins, like vitamin K, which we absorb.
And then?
Then the waste is stored temporarily in the rectum before being eliminated from the body through the anus during digestion. The final step.
What a journey. It really is like an internal factory, meticulously taking everything apart and grabbing what's useful.
An incredibly efficient one.
Okay, so we've got the fuel in through nutrition, but fuel alone isn't enough, is it? You need to sort of burn it to get energy out.
Exactly. You need to release the energy stored in that fuel.
And that brings us to respiration, which is more than just breathing, I take it.
Much more. Breathing, taking air in and out, is technically gas exchange. Respiration at the cellular level is the chemical process of breaking down food molecules, usually glucose, to release energy.
The energy the cells actually use.
Right. And that energy is captured in a molecule called ATP, adenosine triphosphate. It's like the universal energy currency for all life.
ATP. Got it. Are there different ways cells do this?
Yes, two main ways: aerobic and anaerobic respiration.
Okay, aerobic, that sounds like it involves air, oxygen.
Precisely. Aerobic respiration requires oxygen. It happens mostly in the mitochondria, the powerhouses of the cell. It completely breaks down glucose, releasing a lot of energy, tons of ATP, along with carbon dioxide and water as byproducts.
That sounds like the main way we get energy.
It is. For us and most complex organisms, it's very efficient.
And anaerobic.
Anaerobic respiration happens without oxygen. It occurs in the cytoplasm, not the mitochondria. It's a much less complete breakdown of glucose.
The less energy.
Way less energy, only a tiny fraction of the ATP compared to aerobic. And the byproducts are different. In yeast, for example, it produces alcohol and carbon dioxide. That's fermentation.
Ah, like in bread making or brewing.
Exactly. In our muscles, during really intense exercise when oxygen supply can't keep up.
Like sprinting.
Yeah. Muscles can switch to anaerobic respiration temporarily, but it produces lactic acid.
Is that what makes muscles burn and feel fatigued?
That's largely it, yes. That buildup of lactic acid. It's an incomplete, less sustainable way to get energy.
Okay, so aerobic is the main game. How does our body actually manage the gas exchange part, getting oxygen in and CO2 out?
Through our respiratory system, it's a whole pathway designed for efficient air movement and gas exchange.
Let's trace that path. Starts at the nose.
Usually, yes. Air enters the nostrils, goes through the nasal passage where it gets warmed, filtered, and humidified.
Important prep work.
Very. Then it passes through the pharynx, the throat area shared with digestion, and the larynx, which is your voice box.
Down the windpipe.
Right, the trachea. It's a tube reinforced with cartilage rings to keep it open. Then the trachea splits into two main branches, the bronchi, one for each lung.
And they keep branching.
They do, like a tree. The bronchi divide into smaller and smaller tubes called bronchioles.
Leading where?
Ultimately, they lead to tiny, tiny air sacs deep in the lungs called the alveoli. Millions of them.
The alveoli. That's where the action happens.
That's exactly where the gas exchange takes place.
How does the actual breathing work? Inhaling and exhaling.
It's mechanical. During inhalation, your diaphragm, that big muscle under your lungs, contracts and flattens. Your rib muscles contract, lifting your ribs up and out.
Making the chest bigger.
Yes. It increases the volume of your chest cavity. This lowers the pressure inside your lungs compared to the outside air, so air rushes in.
Like a vacuum.
Sort of. And exhalation is usually passive, especially at rest. The muscles relax, the diaphragm domes upwards, the ribs move down and in.
Chest cavity gets smaller.
Right. Volume decreases, pressure inside increases, and air flows out.
Okay, back to those alveoli. Why are they so good at gas exchange?
Their structure is key. They're like tiny balloons with incredibly thin walls, just one cell thick, and they're moist. Plus, they're surrounded by a dense network of tiny blood vessels, capillaries.
Thin walls, lots of blood nearby.
And there are millions of them, creating a huge surface area. Like we said for the gut, think tennis court again.
Wow, for gas exchange.
Yes. This massive, thin, moist surface allows oxygen to easily diffuse from the air in the alveoli into the blood and the capillaries.
And CO2 goes the other way.
Exactly. Carbon dioxide, which is waste from your cells carried by the blood, diffuses from the blood into the alveoli to be breathed out.
How does the blood carry the oxygen, though? Does it just dissolve?
Some dissolves, but not much. Most of it binds to a special protein inside your red blood cells called hemoglobin.
That's what makes blood red.
It is. Hemoglobin picks up oxygen in the lungs where it's plentiful and releases it in the tissues where oxygen levels are lower. It's incredibly efficient at oxygen transport.
Amazing. Do plants respire too? We talked about them taking CO2 in.
They absolutely do. They need energy too, especially when photosynthesis isn't happening, like at night. They take in oxygen and release CO2.
How? Through the stomata again.
Yes, through stomata and also through small pores in their stems called lenticels, and even across the surface of their roots. But their overall respiration rate is much lower than ours.
Because they're less active.
Generally, yes. And an interesting point, terrestrial organisms, like us, have a much easier time getting oxygen than aquatic ones.
Because there's more oxygen in the air than dissolved in water.
Far more. Aquatic animals need very efficient gills to extract enough oxygen from water.
Right, okay. So we've got fuel in nutrition. We've released energy from it, respiration. Now, how does all this stuff, The nutrients, the oxygen, even the waste get moved around the body.
That's the job of transportation or circulation.
The body's delivery service.
An excellent analogy. In complex organisms like us, you can't just rely on diffusion over long distances. You need a dedicated system to deliver supplies and remove waste quickly and efficiently.
Our circulatory system.
Exactly. And it has three main components: the pump, the fluid, and the pipes.
Okay, the pump is the heart.
A heart, yes. It's this incredible muscular organ in your chest, and it's really best thought of as two pumps joined together.
Two pumps.
Yeah. It has four chambers. The right side receives deoxygenated blood from the body and pumps it specifically to the lungs to get oxygenated.
Okay, the pulmonary circuit.
Right. Then the left side receives that freshly oxygenated blood from the lungs and pumps it out to the entire rest of the body.
The systemic circuit.
Exactly. This double circulation is super efficient. And there's a wall, the septum, separating the left and right sides.
Why is that separation important?
It prevents the oxygen-rich and oxygen-poor blood from mixing. This is crucial for warm-blooded animals like us mammals and birds. It allows for a really efficient oxygen supply to tissues, supporting our high metabolic rate and maintaining body temperature.
Makes sense. Okay, pump, heart. What's the fluid?
The fluid is blood. It's technically a connective tissue, but it's fluid.
What's it made of?
It has a liquid part called plasma, which is mostly water. Plasma carries dissolved nutrients, hormones, CO2, waste products like urea.
All the dissolved stuff.
Right. And then suspended in the plasma are the blood cells.
Red and white.
Mainly red blood cells, RBCs, they're the most numerous. They contain the hemoglobin for oxygen transport. Mature ones don't even have a nucleus maximizing space for hemoglobin.
And white blood cells, WBCs.
They're the immune system cells. Much fewer, but vital. They fight infections, engulf bacteria, produce antibodies.
Defenders.
Exactly. And the third component is platelets. They're not whole cells, but small fragments.
What do?
They're crucial for blood clotting. When you get a cut, platelets gather at the site and help form a clot to stop the bleeding.
Very important. Okay, pump, fluid. What about the pipes?
The pipes are the blood vessels. Three main types.
Arteries, veins.
And capillaries. Arteries carry blood away from the heart. Because the blood is under high pressure from the heart's pumping, arteries have thick, strong, elastic walls.
Like the aorta.
The aorta is the biggest artery, carrying oxygenated blood from the left side to the body. But remember, the pulmonary artery is an exception. It carries deoxygenated blood away from the right side to the lungs.
Right, depends on where it's going. What about veins?
Veins carry blood back towards the heart. The pressure is much lower here, so their walls are thinner and less muscular than arteries.
How does blood get back up from your legs against gravity?
Good question. Veins have one-way valves inside them to prevent the blood from flowing backwards. Muscle contractions around the veins also help squeeze the blood along.
The valves are key.
Very key. The main veins bringing deoxygenated blood back are the vena cava, but again, an exception. The pulmonary veins carry oxygenated blood from the lungs back to the left side of the heart.
Always an exception. Okay, arteries, veins, and capillaries.
Capillaries are the tiniest vessels. They form vast networks that connect arteries and veins within the tissues. Their walls are incredibly thin, just one cell thick.
Like the alveoli walls.
Exactly. This is where the actual exchange happens. Oxygen and nutrients diffuse out of the blood into the cells, and CO2 and waste products diffuse into the blood from the cells.
The business end of the system.
Absolutely. We also talk about blood pressure in this system.
Right, systolic and diastolic.
Yes. It's the force of the blood pushing against the artery walls. Systolic is the peak pressure when the heart contracts, usually around 90–120 millimeters of mercury.
And diastolic.
Diastolic is the minimum pressure when the heart relaxes, typically around 60–80. It gives doctors a snapshot of how the system is working.
It really is like an intricate delivery network.
What about plants? They need transport too, right? But no heart.
No heart, no blood, but yes, they definitely need transport. They have their own specialized plumbing system using vascular tissues, xylem and phloem.
Okay, xylem and phloem, what do they do?
Xylem is primarily responsible for transporting water and dissolved minerals from the roots, where they're absorbed up to the rest of the plant, the stem, leaves, flowers.
Upwards flow, how does it move against gravity without a pump?
Mainly through a process driven by evaporation from the leaves called transpiration. It creates a continuous pull, like sucking water up a straw.
Transpiration pull. We'll come back to that. What about phloem?
Phloem transports the food, primarily sugars made during photosynthesis in the leaves, to other parts of the plant where it's needed for growth or storage. Like the roots, fruits, or growing tips.
So food transport, is that also upwards?
It can be upwards or downwards. Flown transport, called translocation, is bidirectional. It moves from the source, where sugar is made or stored, to the sink, where sugar is needed. And that needs energy.
Yes. Loading sugars into the phloem often requires ATP energy. This loading increases the sugar concentration, causing water to enter by osmosis, which builds up pressure and drives the flow.
Clever. Now, tell me more about that transpiration process driving the xylem.
Sure. Transpiration is basically the loss of water vapor from the plant, mostly through those stomata on the leaves.
Like the plant sweating.
It's a good analogy. As water evaporates from the leaf surface, it creates tension, or negative pressure, in the xylem. This tension pulls the continuous column of water molecules all the way up from the roots.
Cohesion and adhesion of water molecules help too, right?
Exactly. Water molecules stick together, cohesion, and stick to the xylem walls, adhesion, maintaining that unbroken column. Transpiration also helps cool the plant and is even a way for the plant to get rid of excess water.
So it's pulling water up, cooling, and waste removal. Multitasking.
Plants are efficient.
Okay, we've covered getting fuel, releasing energy, and transporting everything. The final piece seems to be waste disposal, getting rid of the unwanted stuff.
Excretion, yes, absolutely crucial. It's the process of removing metabolic wastes, the byproducts of all these chemical reactions we've been talking about.
What's the main system for that in humans?
Our main excretory system, often called the urinary system, consists of a pair of kidneys, two tubes called ureters leading from the kidneys, a urinary bladder for storage, and a urethra for releasing urine.
The kidneys are the key players here, aren't they?
Absolutely. They are the primary filters. All your blood passes through your kidneys many times a day. They filter out waste products, especially urea.
Urea comes from protein breakdown.
Yes, it's formed in the liver from the breakdown of amino acids, then transported by the blood to the kidneys for removal. But kidneys do more than just filter waste.
Oh, like what?
They're master regulators. They control water balance, osmolarity, salt and ion concentrations, and blood pH. They keep your internal chemical environment incredibly stable.
Homeostasis.
Precisely.
And inside the kidney, how does the filtering actually happen? You mentioned microscopic units earlier.
That's right. The real workhorses are millions of tiny filtration units in each kidney called nephrons.
Millions? Wow.
Each nephron is intricate. It starts with a tangled ball of capillaries called the glomerulus, surrounded by a cup-like structure, Bowman's capsule. This leads into a long, coiled renal tubule.
So blood goes into the glomerulus.
Yes, under pressure. This forces water, salts, glucose, amino acids, urea, basically small molecules out of the blood and into Bowman's capsule. This fluid is called filtrate. Blood cells and large proteins stay behind.
What's a sieve?
A very fine sieve. But the body doesn't want to lose all that water and useful stuff like glucose and amino acids.
Though it takes them back.
Exactly. As the filtrate flows along the renal tubule, the nephron performs selective reabsorption. Useful substances are actively transported back into the blood capillaries surrounding the tubule. Most of the water is also reabsorbed.
Leaving just the waste behind.
Mostly waste, like urea, excess salts, and some water. This final fluid is urine. It collects from all the nephrons, passes down the ureters to the bladder,
Where it's stored.
until it's released through the urethra. It's an amazing process of filtration and selective recovery.
Are there other organs involved in excretion besides the kidneys?
Yes, supporting roles. The liver, besides making urea, detoxifies many substances and excretes bile pigments like bilirubin, which are breakdown products of hemoglobin.
Okay.
Your lungs are crucial for excreting gaseous waste, primarily CO2 from respiration.
Right, we covered that.
And your skin excretes water, salts, and a small amount of urea and sweat.
So multiple systems contributing. What happens if the kidneys fail?
That's very serious. If kidneys fail, waste products build up to toxic levels. Patients often need hemodialysis.
The artificial kidney machine.
Essentially, yes. Their blood is passed through a machine that filters out the waste and excess fluid, doing the job the kidneys can no longer do. It's life-sustaining.
A vital technology. Okay, what about plants again? How do they get rid of waste without kidneys?
They handle it very differently, much more passively. We mentioned some already. Oxygen from photosynthesis is released. Excess water leaves via transpiration. Some waste products can be stored in tissues that the plant will eventually shed, like falling leaves or pieces of bark.
Taking out the trash, literally.
Kind of. Other wastes might be converted into less harmful forms or stored as things like gums and resins in old xylem tissue that's no longer used for transport.
Gums and resins. Like amber.
Potentially related, yes. And some plants can even excrete certain waste substances directly into the soil through their roots.
Fascinating. Much less complex system, but effective for their needs. Wow. What an incredible journey that was, going through those fundamental processes: nutrition, respiration, transport, excretion. It really highlights how interconnected everything
It
is.
really does. Each process relies on the others. You can't have energy release without fuel intake. You can't deliver the fuel and oxygen without transport. And you need to get rid of the waste generated by it all.
It's this constant coordinated dance that keeps every living thing, from the simplest to the most complex, functioning. Makes you appreciate what's happening inside us every single second.
Absolutely. And it brings up an important thought, doesn't it? Considering how intricately linked these systems are,
Yeah.
what do you think happens if just one of these vital processes gets significantly disrupted? Say, if transport fails or excretion backs up. How might those problems ripple through the entire organism?
The knock-on effects.
Exactly. Something to ponder until our next deep dive.